Sometimes it seems like spring is just never going to get here, but it will. And when it does, I want to be ready to plant some vegetables. Now, in the past, I've always put my vegetables right into the ground, sometimes in raised beds in the ground, but still in the ground. This year, I want to plant some vegetables in a raised container off the ground. Now, there are commercial products out there available. You may have seen them. They're sort of V-shaped, long containers made out of wood. They are fantastic. The company that first brought this out is so protective of its patents or copyrights, and I don't blame them. They should be. They deserve credit because they have a great product. But I'm going to use a little inspiration from seeing their product and use my own ideas to build a raised bed container. And in addition, I'm going to put wheels on it so that it's mobile. That way I can move it around to get the correct sun exposure, or in the fall, when everything is done, I can just roll it out of the way, maybe store it in the barn, and be ready to use it again next year. So let's get started on a raised bed mobile garden container. Alright, if you've watched any of my other videos, you know that drawing and sketching is not my greatest talent, thank goodness. But this is my little sketch of what the thing will look like. You can see it's a container that's kind of got a V shape going down. That's why you'll have deeper dirt in the center and shallower dirt out towards the edges. And we've got legs with cross braces, and then underneath just a real simple 2x4 frame. The legs can sit into dados in that 2x4 frame. And the way I've sort of sketched it out is that the frame itself will be 7 feet long, and the container will be about 70 inches long. The width across here will be 30 inches. And let me just show you a little bit of detail that I also sketched out to show you the leg assembly and a little bit about how these dados are going to be cut. Alright, the leg assembly itself will be 28.5 inches up to the top of this angle, and overall the width between, from edge to edge on the leg assembly will be 30 inches. And the base will be 7 feet long, 84 inches, and we'll start the first dado at 7 inches from this end and 7 inches from this end, and then space them equally so that the 3 leg sets will set right down in there. I'm really bad at drawing wheels, but that's where the wheels will be mounted. Okay, for the base of the planter, I want to double up 2x4s to make a really strong base. Now I've got cedar here. These are roughly 8 feet long. They're 2x4s. And like all 2x4s, they have an eased edge, slight rounding on the corners. And what I want to do is I want to plane off enough of this edge that I get rid of that rounding. And the only reason I'm doing that is because when I put 2 pieces together, if I left the round edges on there, it would form a little cavity right there on the edge, and water could get in there. And since this is going to be outside all the time, if I have 2 perfectly flat edges, I can get a nice seam there that hopefully water won't creep into. So I'm going to take 6 of these and just plane one edge just to get rid of the edge rounding. So the next thing we want to do is we want to cut our base pieces to length. We need 2 pieces 84 inches long, 2 pieces 77 inches long, 2 pieces 30 inches long, and 2 pieces 23 inches long. I'm going to cut off the nasty ends and then cut them to length. All right, so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to actually glue up these pairs of 2x4s, and there'll be a short one and a long one glued together, and of course we want to glue the planed sides together. And what we want to do is we want to space them exactly 3.5 inches from each end. For that, I just set my square at 3.5 inches and struck a couple of marks on each end so I could get these lined up. And we'll do this with the long ones and with the short ones so that in the end, when everything is ready, they will go together just like this. Okay, so the glue up here is pretty straightforward. I'm going to use Type Bond 3 since this is an outdoor project. I'm going to apply the glue to the planed edge of the short piece. Then I'll mate that to the longer piece and line up with my marks on the end. And then because this is sort of construction grade 2x4s, it's pretty good, but there are a little bit of crooks and twists in it. So I'm going to kind of wrestle everything into square and clamp it all together. I've got enough clamps, I think, to get one pair done. I'm going to let that set up, then I'll do the next pair, and then I'll do the 2 short pairs. So I'm going to get to gluing here. All right, another day, another dado. I'm not sure that's exactly the saying. I had to take the afternoon off and go get my hair cut. All right, so I have got the dado set in the saw, and I've got it set to cut a 1/2 inch dado. All we're doing right now is taking our glued up leg sets and cutting a 1/2 inch recess so that the legs of the raised planter will set down in those notches, and that's what will hold it to the rolling base. And I want to cut those dados before I assemble the bottom frame. Now I've got a sled here that I use when I'm cutting dados, and it'll be a little slower, but I've clamped the leg glue up assembly into the sled so that I don't have to worry about holding that down. All I've got to do is just feed the sled through. All right, so I've got one of my legs here, and I'm just going to test the fit. It's tight, but it's going to be just fine. All right, so I've got one of these marked 7 inches from the absolute end on each end, and one dead center in the middle. And of course, there's 2 of these assemblies, so I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 more dados to cut. So I'm going to get those cut, and then we'll look at putting this frame together. Okay, so now with the dados cut for the legs, I've got the dados turned down, and I've got our half lap joints mocked up, and I've got the corners clamped. I used a square to make sure that I've got everything squared up. Only this corner is not clamped yet, but we'll clamp that in just a minute. We're ready to start drilling the holes for the wheels. Now, I decided to go with 2 swivel caster wheels on one end and fixed wheels on the other end. Now, I've had mixed results, honestly, in purchasing things at Harbor Freight, but I did get these at Harbor Freight, and I'll just show you a couple of things. First of all, they are the same size, but the tread pattern on the wheels does not match. I don't know that that's a really big deal because they are the same size, so it should work. I do like the fact that it has grease fittings for the swivel and grease fittings for the wheel itself. Unfortunately, one of the things I found when shopping is that the little stem here for inflating the tire on most of the ones that I looked at was like crushed into the hub, and there was no way that you could have gotten a hose on there to get any air in the tire. So I had to pick through all that they had to find 2 swivel and 2 fixed that I could actually get a hose on and get air into this tire. But either way, I think these will work just fine, and because I got them at Harbor Freight, they were about half the price of some others that I looked at in other locations. Now, one of the other things is that the plate is really too big. But that's going to be okay because we're going to put 3 bolts in, spanning the joint, and I think 3 bolts are going to hold it just fine. And if I need to put a corner brace in here for the 4th bolt, I could do that. But I think it's probably going to be okay. So what I did was I put this up here and I positioned it using my combination square 1/2 inch from the edges. And that's getting those holes in far enough so that we don't take a chance of splintering out the wood. So I marked that with a pencil. And then I found the center points of those sort of oval things, and I'm going to use 3/8 inch hardware. These are 3/8 inch bolts. I decided not to use carriage bolts. I'm going to use a washer instead on there. I just think I like the look of that better. And so I'm going to actually use a 3/8 inch drill bit to drill through here. And that's going to make it kind of tight, but I sort of want it tight. I want to be able to more or less pound through the bolt and not have a lot of slop in it. And I'm going to clamp this from the bottom. I wish I had a 3rd hand, but I want to have a backer board on here because remember, we have this top side down right now, and I don't want splintering on the back side that would ultimately show. Not that this is a showpiece, but the splintering would make it weaker and it would be ugly and it wouldn't be indicative of that class that we have as woodworkers. So with that clamped in place now, I can drill these 3 holes, and I'm using a brad point drill bit. And there we go. And I'll get a wrench and tighten that up in just a little bit. Okay. Okay, so I've got these nice and finger tight. I'm going to do this in all 4 corners, and then I'm going to come back and re-square everything and tighten these down good with a wrench, and our base assembly is finished. Alright, so here's our finished base for our raised bed mobile planter, and I think it's going to be okay. I may need to put a little air in these tires, but it rolls easy enough and it looks okay. I'm going to do a little sanding on the edges of this before I go any further, because I am going to eventually stain this before it goes outside, just to give it a little bit of extra protection. Alright, in the next video we'll really get to the construction of the planter itself, and if you want to get ahead of the game and get ready, you can cut 6 legs out of 2x4 material. Again, I'm using cedar, and these 6 legs need to be 29.5 inches long, and then cut 3 pieces 30 inches long. And in the next video we'll cut the dados and the half laps to put a brace across these legs, And we're going to bolt those together, and then we're going to build our slanted V-shaped planter box. Look forward to seeing you in the next video, and thank you so much for watching this one.